Today's webinar is about time management. And are you all excited? Are you looking forward to the webinar? Of course you are, because there's nothing more exciting than time management. Absolutely. Of course. Oh no, it's raining in Germany. I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully you'll enjoy some of the sunshine coming through this window, which we don't get very much. So my understanding, of course, is because you're teachers, you're here to get my tips on what to do with all of the spare time that you have, because teaching is really easy. You just go into the classroom, you speak English, and that's it. You have lots and lots of time to have a life. Is that true? No, of course not. Of course not. So there is a lot more to teaching than just standing in a classroom. Well, I suppose it depends what day you're having. So let's see if you can all use the chat box. What other tasks do you do apart from teaching? What other things do you have to do as a teacher? Type some examples in the chat box. Correcting homework, preparing lessons, meeting parents, looking for resources, finding materials, assessment, organizing Halloween parties. Of course, Halloween is coming up. I should have brought some ideas for Halloween parties. Lots of admin. Yes, so you are doing a lot more than just teaching. And some of you may even like to have a life outside your job, although probably you wouldn't have chosen to be a teacher if you wanted a life. But anyway, so here's a list of some of the things that I think you might have to do. So of course, planning, lesson preparation, as you said, meeting parents, registers, paperwork, attending Macmillan webinars and reading the Advancing Learning blog that we have, marking homework and looking at reports. And it's interesting actually, because the lessons, well, they happen at a fixed time. So you can't do your 10 a.m. lesson on a Wednesday. You can't decide to do it at 3 o'clock on a Thursday. That would be crazy. But all of these tasks are not timetabled. And this, I think, is one of the problems when you're a teacher. You have nobody telling you exactly when you should do these tasks and how long they should take. How long should you spend on your professional development in a week? How long should it take you to plan a lesson? So it's actually quite difficult, I think, to manage our own time. And that's why we've got the webinar today to give you a few tips. But before we start with the tips, I have a quick quiz for you. I'm going to show you some pictures. So I want you to tell me what they have in common. So if you can just type in the chat box, what do those pictures have in common? I'll give you 30 seconds. Hobbies, leisure, they're enjoyable, free time. Exactly. Well, so we've got playing the guitar, watching football, playing with your phone, drinking coffee, and cooking. These are all things that I love doing. So these are all kind of my hobbies. The problem, of course, is that's not the only thing they have in common. They are also distractions. So these represent the first enemy of good time management. I think it's absolutely fine to decide, okay, for the next half an hour, I'm going to play the guitar. What happens to me is I decide for the next half an hour, I'm going to plan my lesson, and then I see the guitar, and then I pick it up, and instead of planning my lesson, I'm completely distracted, and I play the guitar for half an hour. So that's why the guitar for me is one of the big enemies of good time management. So let's have a look at some of the other enemies of time management. Procrastination, I'm an expert on this. The Macmillan Online Dictionary defines procrastination as to delay doing something until later usually something that you do not want to do. What I find is if there is a big piece of cake in front of me, I don't procrastinate, I just eat the cake. But if I have to do a report, well, maybe I should check that my software is updated. Maybe I should remind myself how to do the filter on the Excel spreadsheet. Maybe I should back up my computer. So I'll do lots of things rather than do the job that I don't like doing. When we're teaching, one of the issues that can cause us time management problems is lack of planning, because 10 minutes before the lesson, we suddenly realize we don't have the material we need. So we run around the teacher's room trying to find things, and that's not really effective time management. Another potential enemy of good time management is the opposite, is too much planning. As we said at the beginning, there's no limit to the amount of time. There's nobody telling us that you must spend 20 minutes on planning or half an hour. And I think we have to be really careful, because we teach a lot, and it is possible to become stressed and to suffer from burnout if we're spending far too much of our time planning. This one is a controversial one. As teachers, we obviously want everything to be perfect, but sometimes to take a lesson from very good to perfect can take a lot of time. And I think, yes, the lesson might benefit from this extra activity, but if it takes 1 hour to prepare it, is it really a good use of our time? I think sometimes it's fine to do a very good lesson rather than the perfect lesson, especially if we want to manage our time effectively. One of the sins that we teachers commit sometimes is we try to do too much ourselves, and we don't utilize our students well enough. The students can be a great resource, and so later in the second half of this webinar, we're going to look at some ideas as to what you can get your students doing to save you some time. And I also think one of the enemies of good time management is perhaps not having a system to manage our time. And that is what we're going to have a look at in the first half of today's webinar. And today our plan is to try to defeat some of these enemies of good time management. So we've looked at what we mean by time management and what some of the problems are. What I want to do in the first half is talk about three models of time management that come from the wider business world and not just applicable to education. So we're going to look at some advice from a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Then we're going to look at a time management system called GTD. And lastly, we're going to explore what the bullet journal is and how that can help teachers. In the second part of the webinar, we're going to have a look at some lesson preparation tips. So things that you can do to save yourself time when preparing your lessons. So are you all ready? So many of you here. Great to see so many of you. I know that some of you are just joining us now because you're so busy, because you're working very hard. So let's first look at a book written by someone who is often quoted in terms of time management, and that's Stephen Covey. He was an American educator and the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that book has sold over 30 million copies. Now, the problem, of course, is we're teachers and we're really busy, so we don't have time for 7 habits. So today, I'm just going to skip 6 of them. We're going to go straight to habit number 3 and see if habit number 3 can help us. So, according to, I think one of the key problems we have in the modern world is we've got endless tasks coming at us. I don't know how many emails you receive a day, but sometimes we can get 30, 40, 50, even more emails a day. And the problem, I think, is trying to decide how we prioritize things. So this is from Stephen Covey's book, his tip on how to manage a big list of things that we need to do. And in this habit, he introduces us to a tool, and it's this unusual looking box on the screen. And that tool is sometimes referred to as the Eisenhower matrix. So if it's good enough for a president, then it's good enough for us teachers. And I'll talk about how he recommends we use this table to decide where we should be spending our time. But before we look at that, why don't we look at a to-do list? So I used to be, as Federica said in the introduction, I used to manage a school in Milan, in Italy. So I thought, well, I wonder what a typical to-do list would be for a school director. So here is an example. So we've got lots of tasks on there. I hope that you can see them. So everything from, I might have to replace a teacher who's called in sick. I might want to look at Macmillan's new book, Language Hub, and want to have time to review that. When I lived in Italy, I ate a lot of food, so it was very important for me to exercise, and then I've got lots of emails to deal with. So these are the things on my to-do list. And the first thing that Stephen Covey recommends is that we decide how to categorize them. So using my to-do list, let's have a look at his famous matrix and how that can help us with our time management. So the matrix has two columns. The one that you can see on the left is headed urgent, and the one on the right is for tasks that are not urgent. We don't need to worry about the rows at the moment. We're just looking at the columns. So I have two things from my to-do list. Fix the light in the school bathroom and spend some time with the new teacher. So in the chat box, what about fixing the light in the school bathroom? Is that something urgent? Is that something that needs doing in the next few hours, or is it not urgent? So you can type in the box if it's urgent or not urgent. Well, of course, it can depend, but I would probably say that the students will like to have the light working in the school bathroom. So I would say it's urgent. And what about spending some time with the new teacher? Is that something that I have to do right now, or is it something I can do in a few days? So it depends. So probably it's less urgent than the fixing the light. This is something I don't have to do right now. I can probably do this tomorrow or by the end of the week. And so yes, I would say that fixing the light is urgent and speaking to the teacher is not so urgent. Now, there are also two rows on Stephen Covey's matrix. And as you can see on the top, it's classified as important. And on the bottom, it's classified as not important. So here I have another task, reply to a request from a conference organizer. So this is an email sitting in my inbox. Now, for me, actually, this request is not important, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm not going to go to this conference. I haven't got the time to go to the conference, and I'm not able to give a presentation. So remember, this is my to-do list, so it's not important for me. So I put it on the bottom, on the row that says not important. There was another task on my list, which was to read the gossip pages. So I want to know if all the actors from Friends have met recently and shared a photograph on Instagram. So let's have a look at the whole table and see where we put that. So if you see, it's in box number 4, because it's really not that important whether the actors from Friends have met, or at least for me, and it's certainly not urgent. So it goes on the right-hand side in not urgent, and on the bottom row in not important. So as you can see, Stephen Covey's matrix is divided into 4. So we've got quadrant 1, which is urgent and important. In quadrant 2, it's important but not urgent. In quadrant 3, it's not important but urgent. And in quadrant 4, it's not important and not urgent. So this can be a little bit confusing. So let's try some examples, and you tell me where to put the task from my to-do list. So the next task I have is to plan my lesson, which is at 12 o'clock in a couple of hours. So do I put that in box 1, 2, 3, or 4? Yes, of course. I'm going to put it in box 1. My students are the most important people, and it's only 2 hours away, so I don't have a lot of time, so I really need to get that done quickly. Now, my lovely friend from Macmillan has left me a copy of the new course book, Language Hub, and I want to review that. So where do I put that? Do I put that in box 1, box 2, box 3, or box 4? So I think we all agree. Of course, it's from Macmillan, so of course it's important. Everything from Macmillan is important, but it's not urgent. It's not something that I need to do right now. So this I can do in a few days' time, so I put it in box 2. I've also got an email that's explaining all the exciting new features of the new software on my phone. So where would you put that email? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay, I think it can depend. For me, it's in box 4. It's certainly not urgent, and really, I don't know that much about the software on my phone, and it's not that important. Probably, if I was a software developer, it would be going somewhere else, because it would be very important information. Now, the next task I have is I want to watch the recording from Chia's webinar. So Chia did a webinar for us last week, and it's now available on our website. Where would you put that? Watching a professional development webinar. 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay, for me, I put it in number 2. For me, my development is important, and I'm sure we have over 400 teachers here online now, and obviously you're dedicating an hour of your time, so development is important to you as well. But it isn't urgent. It isn't something that I need to get done today. What about finding a replacement teacher? My teacher, who is teaching at 11 o'clock, is sick, so I need to find a replacement. Yeah, everyone is saying the same thing. So I'm going to say that is very urgent and very important. If I don't do that, the students will arrive and there will be no teacher, and that will be a disaster. So that is an example of Stephen Covey's idea from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, don't worry, the point isn't that you need to write all of your to-dos into this grid. The key thing is that we reflect on where are we spending our time. Now, of course, the things in quadrant 1, in the box 1, those are things we have to do now. Those are urgent and important. Planning my lesson, finding a replacement teacher, they need to be done right now. If not, they're going to be big problems. We can't ignore box 1. But in fact, a lot of us spend most of our time in box 1, fighting fires, always dealing with one crisis after another, and that can be quite stressful. Number 3, those are things that are urgent, but not important. So it's urgent because the conference organizer needs a reply to their email, but really we want to try and spend as little time as possible doing things that are not important. Quadrant 4, reading the gossip pages, that's the time waster's dream. This is where nothing is important and nothing is urgent. So if we're spending a lot of time in there, then we're going to create problems because the important and urgent stuff has not been done. The key quadrant for Stephen Covey is the second one, number 2, and he says that most of the world's highly effective people spend a lot of their time doing the tasks in quadrant 2. And it's easy to not do those tasks because they're not urgent. But if they get left, they eventually move to quadrant 1. They become a crisis. So if I give you an example, for example, exercise. Exercise is something that's very important, but it's not necessarily always a priority. It's not necessarily urgent. But if you don't do the exercise, it can eventually become a health issue. Suddenly you've got a health problem, and that appears in box 1. It's something urgent and important. Getting to know the new teacher will have really good benefits for us. And so Stephen Covey's advice is to make sure you find the time to do that and do the other things in box 2. And he suggests a very simple tool to do that. And it's this. It's a weekly calendar. And he says it's very simple. You have to decide at the beginning of the week what your important but not urgent tasks are, and block them on your calendar to make sure that you do them. It's very easy to let other people book appointments with you on your calendar. Stephen Covey is suggesting that you book an appointment with yourself. So if I give you an example, of course we're teachers, so the first things that go on our calendars are our lessons. So the lessons are there in red, but then what I've done is all of those important but not urgent things, I've booked appointments with myself to do them. That will stop those important things becoming a crisis. And so it's really important that we treat those like real appointments, and that we actually do them so that at the end of the week we've achieved a lot of the important tasks. The book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is full of great advice, and we've just taken one example. But I think it's a really useful one to think about prioritizing the things that are important but not urgent, and making sure they go on your calendar before all of the other stuff does. Now, we're going to look at something called GTD. Have you heard of GTD? Just type yes or no in the box if you've heard of GTD. Okay, so GTD stands for Getting Things Done. And this is a time management approach created by a guy called David Allen. It can be a fairly complex system to get your head around at first, but there are some really useful ideas for getting control amidst all the chaos. And I think in 2019, we live in particularly chaotic times. We've got information coming at us from social media, from the web, from our email. I saw some statistics yesterday. Apparently, there are nearly 500,000 tweets sent every minute. YouTube viewers are watching over 4 million videos per minute. And on Facebook, in every minute, there are 3 million new posts. So it's no wonder that we're all tired and feeling a little crazy. So David Allen has some suggestions about how to deal with this information that's coming at us. There are some underlying principles, and we'll look at these in a little bit of detail. The first one is to clear your head. According to David, the brain is great for having ideas, but it's not a great place to keep your ideas. So we'll look at what he suggests as a solution to that. Secondly, he suggests that often things hold our attention because we haven't done sufficient thinking about those things. We haven't decided what to do with them, and so they keep going around our head and we worry about them. So he has a system that means we will engage with everything appropriately and know what to do with it. So we'll look at that. And lastly, he suggests that we have a current system that we can trust, where we know we have tracked everything we need to do. Before we look at the specifics of his advice, let me ask you another question. Have you ever been distracted? Have you ever been doing a task and realized your brain is thinking about something else? It's never happened to me, of course. Of course, it happens all the time. So is this scenario familiar to you? So you arrive home, you put your bag down, and as you put your bag down, you notice the alarm is flashing, and you realize the battery needs replacing. As you take your coat off, you realize that you forgot to go to the shop and you didn't buy the loaf of bread that you wanted. As you put your keys down, you see on the side, there's the electricity bill from that you should have paid last week. So you decide to make a cup of tea, you walk into the kitchen, and as you do that, you remember it's your sister's birthday and you must buy her a present. So as you make the cup of tea, you remember that you forgot to do the report that your boss set you. And as you relax drinking your tea, you think of a great fun exercise that you can do with your students. Does that sound familiar? And that's just the first 5 minutes of getting home. Now, the problem with that is, where do we keep that information? Most of us keep it in our heads. And so if you imagine that's every 5 minutes, then our heads are going to be pretty full by the time we go to bed. So David Allen has a solution, and he says what we need to do is capture all of those things, and we need to capture it in an external brain. Would you like to see my external brain? Of course. So this is my external brain. It's very precious, very expensive. That's it. So by capture, what David Allen simply means is to write it down. And it's a very simple tip, but we really often don't do it, and we just keep everything in our heads. Now, I'm old, so I use a notebook, but you're all much younger than me, and of course you can use a notes app on your phone. But to give you an example, all of those things like before, the bread, the electricity bill, I would note them down like that in my notebook. So that notebook for me is really a kind of inbox. They're just messages to myself of things that I need to do, or things to remember. And modern life is full of lots of inboxes, places where you can leave a note to yourself, or where other people can leave notes to you, so that they can get you to do things for them. So, I mean, it could be the notebook, it might be iMessages on your phone, it could be your email inbox, could be Facebook Messenger. We've got lots of places where people can leave you to do things. And that's where we capture all of these things. So we do, I can see people agreeing, we need an external brain. I know I need an external brain. But it's not enough just to capture these things. We then have to do something with them. And this is where David Allen says we need to have a special process, so that we go through everything in our inbox one by one, and we think about it and we decide what it means to us and what we need to do. So I'm going to talk you through that process. It will take about 5 minutes, but I found it really useful. You can use that process on your notebook. You can do it with your Facebook messages. I found it really useful with my email inbox. I think we often spend a lot of time wasting time with email. We go in and we read the first part of an email, and then we come back to it and we read it again, and we still can't decide when to do it, what to do with it. And so we just leave it in the inbox. So now it's confession time, people. How many of you have got more than 10 emails in your inbox? Just type yes in the chat box, or me. You're good, you're all confessing. Does anybody have more than 50? Yes, some of you are begging me not to ask any more questions. Anyone got more than 100? I think I saw the number 1,800 there. Someone said I never erased them. More than 500. Okay, there isn't a prize, I'm afraid, for who has the most emails in their inbox. But let's see, if we go through David's method, let's see if that might help you reduce some of the clutter that you've got in your inbox. So let's, we'll take my inbox as an example. And the first thing you ask when you look at an email, is it something actionable? Do I need to do something? And so here's my first email. These new diet pills are great. So this is an email offering me some diet pills. Is it actionable? No. Look at me. I don't think I'm ever going to go on a diet. And if I did, I certainly wouldn't use diet pills. So it's not actionable. And when it's not actionable, whatever the email or whatever the note, there are three possible things I can do. I might decide to keep it for reference, but I don't want to keep the diet pills for reference. I might decide to put it on hold and do it later, but I'm not going to do that. So in the chat box, what should I do with this email? Trash it. Great. Yeah, bin it, delete it, nuke it. Yes. Whatever word we want to use. It's my favorite thing to do with emails, is put it in the trash. So that's great. That's the first one down. So the first one has gone in the trash. Now the second email. The new guitar shop catalog is here. Is this actionable? Well, I like the guitar, I play the guitar, but I'm not planning to buy a guitar now, so I'm not going to do anything with this email. But I think one day I will buy a new guitar, and so I am going to keep this for reference. So I move it out of my inbox into a folder that is called reference. And then maybe in the future I can have a look at that. Next email. 10 tips for learning Russian. Does anybody here speak Russian? Yeah, I thought so. Is it an easy language to learn? No. It depends. So, is this email actionable? I am not studying Russian, so it's not really useful for me at the moment. And with the guitar, I know that one day I will buy a new guitar, but I'm not sure about learning Russian. I'd really like to learn Russian. It's a beautiful language, but I have no plans to do it at the moment. So I think what I'm going to do is put this on hold and incubate it. So what I do is I have a special folder called Someday Maybe, and who knows? Russian is more important than the guitar. I agree. Maybe I should change my priorities. But I've taken it again out of my inbox and it's gone into Someday Maybe. If I had real plans to start learning Russian, I could just put it on hold. But at the moment, who knows? You'll have to convince me that I should. Now the next email is from my boss. And it says, send me the latest webinar report. Is this actionable? Of course it is. Anything from your boss is actionable. And when it's actionable, according to David Allen's system, is you just ask yourself, what's the next action? Well, the next action here is to send the report to my boss. So when I've identified the action, I've got three possible things that I can do with that action. Now, I could delegate it to somebody, but actually, I'm the only person who has the report, so I can't delegate that. I could defer it, but I'm actually going to do it. Now, what we're doing here is we're processing the inbox. We're trying to think and decide for each email what to do with it. We're not here to do everything unless, and this is the magic 2-minute rule, unless it will take less than 2 minutes. This rule changed my life in terms of email. So if it's going to take less than 2 minutes, it's just as quick to do it as to sit there and think about it and decide what to do. So I'm going to take option 3, do it, because all I need to do is to reply to my boss and attach the webinar report, and that is done. And then I move it out of my inbox and if I want to keep it, I can keep it in my reference folder. So let's look at the next email. So can you send me the Language Hub brochure? So this is from a teacher in a school asking for the Language Hub brochure. I could do it and I could follow the 2-minute rule, but actually I don't have the Language Hub brochure and it would take me about 5 minutes to locate it. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to take option 1 and I am going to delegate this to Federica. Federica did a great job introducing me. So her reward is a new task in her email. So I'm going to forward that email to Federica and ask her to do that for me. And then I move it out of my inbox. Federica will be very happy. I will move it from, see, she's thanking us in the chat box. I will move it from the inbox into the reference folder. And of course, because Federica likes to ask me to do things as well. So the last email is she's asked me if I can send the slides for my next webinar. And we have a little problem here because I haven't prepared the slides for my next webinar. And I can't delegate it because it's my webinar. So it doesn't fit the 2 minutes rule. It's going to take me about 2 hours to put these slides together. So I then have to defer it. And when you defer it, it means one of 2 things. Like we did earlier, you can make an appointment on your calendar, or you can add it to your list of next actions. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to block 2 hours on my calendar on Friday to do the slides, and then I'll reply to Federica that I'll send the slides to her on Friday. And then I can move that email out of my inbox. I don't need to worry about it because I have the reminder on my calendar. And so after just a few minutes, I have got an empty inbox. And somebody said to me, well, why is that important? Well, there are a few things I think that help by having an empty inbox. One thing means that you've gone through everything and you've got the security that you haven't missed anything. It is nice to have everything out of sight so you're not searching through 200 emails in your inbox. And I think it saves you time in the long run because you decide quickly and firmly what you need to do for each item. And finally, the final reason is this. Is there anything better than opening your email and seeing that it's completely empty and you can relax? Although probably in about 30 seconds it will start filling up again. And the third part of David Allen's system is you need to maintain a trusted system. So basically this is talking about the deferred actions. What you want to make sure is that you don't forget them. So if it's on the calendar, that's fine because you'll see it on your calendar and you'll do it. The other place to put your deferred actions are on next action lists. And the important thing here is that it's a plural. It's not just one list. What he suggests is that you have different lists depending on your context. So according to David, if you are in your school, you don't need to see a list of everything you want to buy in the supermarket. And the same, if you're in the supermarket, you don't need to see a list of all the emails that you have to send. So I'll give you an example using, if you remember the tasks that were in my notebook, I've now moved those to my next action lists. So I have now a list for the shops to buy the bread and the batteries. I have a list for when I'm online. I need to pay my electricity bill and check Amazon for my sister's present. So you can have it on paper, but to be honest now, I think most people have their to-dos in apps. And the great thing is you can usually tag your to-do, and you can actually use these contexts as the tag, so that when you are in the shop, you just, on your to-do list, just click shop and it will tell you everything you need to buy. So I think that's there's some useful things there in terms of dealing with just the sheer number of things that you have to deal with on a daily basis. As somebody here has said that they have a list for their husband, that's a great idea as well. So you can have a list for each person in your family. Now, before we start looking at lesson planning tips, I have one more time management tool to talk to you about, and this is something called the bullet journal. We've just spoken about apps. Well, the final piece of advice from outside the world of education comes from a guy called Ryder Carroll. This is a totally analog version, and I have got my own bullet journal here. This is something that I use every day, and it's a system based on one notebook. The idea that one notebook or one journal can help you organize and record your life. And this is a system that Ryder created when he was at school. He suffered from ADHD, and he created this own methodology so that he could keep track of everything that he needs to do. It doesn't need to be, you can be as creative as you want or as minimal as you want. You don't need a special notebook, but there are a few sort of principles behind it. I mean, the advantage of it is that you can use it to record the day-to-day. You can have all your to-do lists in one place. It gives you, I think, when you have to write something down with a pen, it gives you an excuse to stop and think about things. And this system is also really flexible. The principles, it's based on something called rapid logging, and the sort of three key elements are topics, page numbers, and bullets. And let me give you an example. I know I've seen some questions saying, what does it look like on the inside? Well, I'll give you an example of how you would do it. So you might start the day with a new title. So I would open my bullet journal on the first page, write the day and the date, and I'm set. And what I'm going to do during the day is I'm going to track three things. I'm going to track tasks, events, and notes. So this is how it works. Let's say I wake up in the morning and I think, oh, I need to pick up a parcel from the post office. What's that? Well, that's a task. And in the bullet journal, the bullet for a task is a dot. And so what I would do is I would just quickly write down dot, pick up parcel. That's the task. Now, while I'm having my cup of coffee in the morning, I'm looking out the window, and remember this is a journaling system as well, and I see a beautiful woodpecker on the tree in my neighbor's garden, and I think, oh, I want to write that down. That's something I want to remember, and that is an event. And so in the bullet journal, you use a circle to record an event. So I would add amazing view of woodpecker. We don't get so many woodpeckers where I live. Then I'm on the tube, I've got my bullet journal with me, and I come up with a great idea for a webinar, a special webinar for teachers, and I think I need to write this down. So it's just a note, and the bullet for notes is a dash. And so I would add webinar idea, best cakes for teachers. I think that would be a fantastic webinar. I'm going to think about who could offer that. And this carries on throughout the day, and because you're using different bullets, you can quickly see what things that you need to do, what things are just like a traditional diary entry, and what things are notes. And this is something that you would review at the end of the day. It just means you're not running around going from one system to another using the same system. And actually, when you complete a task, you just put a cross through that task bullet, so that you can also see that you've completed what you want to do. Now, that is a very quick explanation of the basics, and I recommend that you actually go and look at the bullet journal website. There's also a video on YouTube where Ryder Carroll goes into a lot more detail. One last thing I want to share with you about the bullet journal that's really useful is the concept of collections. This is what we've seen so far, is how you track a day, but perhaps you want to track a particular project. And so I'll give you an example. So one of my classes is LH2, and so I decide I want to have a page dedicated to my class. So I take the next blank page in my book, I write class LH2 at the top, and then I keep coming back to this page whenever I want to add anything. So here's an example. I've got the names of the students, but what I'm also using this for is to track the homework. So you can see on the 5th of October, I set page 38 as the homework, and that's that page is dedicated to that class. And so that's what is called a collection in the bullet journal, and you can create whatever collections you want. That's the good thing about the system. It's completely flexible. So in the next Macmillan webinar is from our author Malcolm Mann. So if you're watching that, you can have a page just for that webinar, and you can make the notes. If you're in a teacher's meeting, you can have a page for that. If you have to write some reports, you could keep all your notes for the report on that page as well. One of the key things of the system is the pages are numbered, and at the beginning of the book you actually can create an index, so you can always find things. So if you have someone said they've been doing this all this life and not knowing without a think that it's an actual thing. You would have made a lot of money if you got there before Ryder Carroll. So for example, I can see that my notes from Malcolm's webinar are on page 14, and if you need more than a page, you just go to the next blank page and carry on writing, and you can reference it in your index. So you can see that the notes from Malcolm Mann start on page 14, but they also go to page 19 and 20 as well. I think it's really useful because often if you're using a notebook, it's really easy to lose things, and you can't remember where you wrote down that great activity for your class. So that's really useful. And also you can make a note at the bottom of the page to carry on to page 18. It's a very flexible system. I advise you to have a look at that. A lot of teachers are using it, and these are just some quotes from teachers saying about the benefits. And in fact, you can have a look online, and lots of teachers are now encouraging their students to use bullet journals, and they're finding it's really helping their students to be organized and focused. So what we've done so far is we've had a look at 3 time management systems. So I hope you found something useful from those systems. They're not from education, but I think they can help, and especially the times we live in, we're surrounded by lots of information and requests. What I want to do for the last 10 minutes is to look at one particular area of teaching that demands a lot of our time, and that's planning lessons. So here are a few tips on how to reduce your lesson planning time. Now, of course, I work for a publisher, so I'm going to say use a good course book. But actually, this is something that I always believed when I was working in a school, when I taught, that it's really important to have a good course book because it can save you so much time. And there's so much energy and thinking gone into each course book that it's really worth using them. Also, use it well. And so somebody's mentioned in the chat box that if you saw Chia gave a webinar a couple of weeks ago about this, and I really recommend that you have a look on our webinar site and check out the recording because it was really useful advice on what to do. But have a look at your contents page before you even start using the book, and get to know the structure of the book. And so this is from our course Language Hub, and you can see that they have a unit review. There's a special section for writing. There's something called Cafe Hub, which is a video. So it's really useful for you to have that information before you even start planning your lessons. And listen, this is not Lord of the Rings. This is a course book. I give you permission to skip to the end of the book. There are no spoilers. You can look through the book. It's not going to spoil the story. And there's often some good stuff at the back of the book. So you might find the audio scripts, you might find the phonemic chart. So that's going to save you time when you're planning to know where those things are. And of course, it's not just a paper book now. There's lots of digital components. Don't ignore those. There's lots of useful stuff on there that could mean that you could set a task on the Students app, for example. Have a look at the website and see what kind of teacher support there is. And as we mentioned, Chia gave a great webinar about that very essential component of any course, which is a teacher's book. I have to say I'm really jealous because I think the teacher's book from Language Hub is the best I've ever seen. So I really wish I was teaching with it right now. But the teacher's book is going to save you lots of time in terms of planning. So you can see that it will give you the procedure to follow, which you can tweak, but it's really useful to have that procedure there. The Language Hub teacher's book has extra activities that you can do in the lesson. So you can see the teaching idea that doesn't need any preparation. And of course, it's got lots of photocopyable activities as well. So really worth looking at your course book and seeing what it has to offer. Of course, you're creative, you're teachers, so it's also great to supplement as well. I would just say be careful. Ask yourself, is it worth the effort? So if it's going to take you 3 hours to prepare a game that's only going to take 10 minutes in the classroom, then it's probably not worth spending those 3 hours. And also, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are lots of resources available. Maybe your colleagues have made resources, but you may find them on websites. We have a resource website called One Stop English, and for a small fee, you can download lots and lots of extra classroom materials. At the beginning, somebody mentioned Halloween. Well, we've got lots of Halloween resources on One Stop English. So it would save you hundreds of hours, I would say, in a year if you're using these sort of professionally prepared resources. So it's really worth seeing what else is there. But if you do create some good activity, then look after it. Keep it in a nice folder or keep it on your computer and know where it is. Make sure that the next year you can find it so you're not having to create it again. I remember spending lots of time when I was planning lessons thinking, oh, where was that really good activity I used 2 years ago about football or whatever it was. So make sure you've got a system for keeping those things. Of course, recycling is very important, but it's also something you can do to save yourself some time. Don't be afraid to do an exercise more than once. The lesson opener is a great place to do an exercise again. So these are some things that I used to do. So at the beginning of a lesson, I would take some of the photocopies, the worksheets from the previous lesson, I would put them around the room like an art gallery, and I would just ask the students to walk around in pairs and chat to each other as if they were looking at pictures, saying, oh, can you remember, what did we do, what did we learn, what was the activity, what was difficult? So it's just 2 or 3 minutes, they're walking around. It's really useful for them because they're reviewing, and it means you don't have to prepare any extra materials whatsoever. Another option is you could take the course book and you could find a picture. So you take a picture from the last lesson, and the students in pairs would discuss what they used the picture for, what the language was, and sometimes it's absolutely fine to do the same activity again. So if you finish the lesson with a great communicative activity, then why not start the next lesson with the same activity and see if they can remember the language, see if they can do it again. The course books are full of stories, sometimes picture stories, stories on audio, stories on videos. At the start of the next lesson, say, right, who remembers the story from next week? In your pairs, tell the story to each other. It's really useful for them. It's just some nice revision, and you don't have to create any new material. And of course, we should use the students as much as possible. I think sometimes we do too much for them. Perhaps, I don't know, I remember spending half an hour finding photographs of 10 famous celebrities. Well, actually, what you could do is just bring some magazines into the classroom and get each of the students to choose their own celebrity from the magazine, and they could describe that celebrity or use that celebrity in the role play. On One Stop English, we have a blog called Advancing Learning, and a few months ago, amazing polyglot and teacher trainer Katie Harris wrote a post about guilt-free teaching and how to plan without spending too much time. This is from her article. She's got some great ideas to replace flashcards. It can take ages to find the right flashcards or create the right flashcards. So she suggests things like drawing them yourself, which always makes the students laugh. So you could also get the students to draw, so they could imagine they're in a restaurant and draw on flashcards the food that they can see. Lots of other ideas. You can mime. Everyone likes to see their teacher miming strange objects and things. Another great activity is to take the course book and ask a student to choose a picture and describe it to the other students, and then the other students need to find the same picture in their course book. So lots of things that you can do. And just before we finish, the last thing I think where we spend a lot of time is on marking. Just a few very quick tips, and I was inspired by Chia's article in ELT Professional, Top 10 Time Management Tips for Teachers. If you've got lots of classes, be kind to yourself and make sure that you're not setting big homework tasks to be handed in on the same day from all of your groups. You can use technology in giving feedback from homework. So you can this was an idea I got from Russell Stannard. You can put the Word document on your computer and you can record a video so the students can then hear your feedback. And Chia's suggestion is to limit the feedback. Tell the students you're only going to look at one thing. So it could be paragraph structure, it might be vocabulary. And if it's an activity that is very simple, yes and no answers, well, you can use the students. They can check themselves. And I think some of the systems that we looked at today can help you to organize any kind of project, but especially your homework. So I hope that you've had some useful tips today. I think in terms of lesson planning, be your own best friend, be kind to yourself. And whenever you can save yourself time, do it. And actually using the students is going to help maximize their learning. Just some quick references, and I'll show these again at the very end. These are the 3 productivity methods, and these are the 2 articles I mentioned, and also I recommend having a look at Russell's video on giving feedback. So thank you all so much for joining us, hundreds of teachers from all around the world, and Federico is back in the room. just to stop me sending any more emails, I think. So.
Hi everyone. So yeah, Mike was sending me so many emails through his presentation that I just had to come. And I really want to thank you, Mike, because it was a really great session.
Thank you.
Lots of insights. And if you have any questions, just type them in the chat box and Mike will be here to answer. So a few questions that we had in the meantime, and I've been reading them in the chat box, are this is hard. How do you actually prioritize urgent and important tasks when they're both? How do you, give them a priority?
I think it's that's the dilemma. And I think fundamentally that's why Stephen Covey suggests that you work as much as possible in the second quadrant, in the important but not urgent, because it stops things becoming important and urgent. But if you've got urgent and important tasks, and you've got a lot of them, and we all do, I think you have to balance two things. One of them will be the time. For example, the to-do list that I showed you, we had to replace a teacher at 11 o'clock, and I had to plan my 12 o'clock lesson. Well, obviously, that 11 o'clock one needs dealing with first. And then I think you need to judge the potential impact. So when I was in the school, anything that might potentially have a negative impact on the students always took priority over anything else. So that might be why I would run into the bathroom and change the light bulb before I did anything else. So it's difficult, and if you follow his method, hopefully you just get fewer tasks in that urgent and important box.
That's great, thank you. And then another question that we got was, how long should a teacher spend preparing lessons? That's a good question.
I think my philosophy would be you want to minimize the amount of time, but at the same time maximize the students' learning. So it's really difficult to give you a time. Teaching kids is very different to teaching adults. Teaching an exam preparation course is very different to teaching general English course. I think it also depends how many hours you're teaching a week. But we would like a life. There's a recent survey saying that a lot of teachers in the UK are working over 60 hours a week. I think most people in other jobs are working 40 to 45 hours. So if you can get all of your planning done and all of your lessons in 40 to 45 hours, then I think that would be fair. And then you might even be able to, I don't know, speak to your friends or actually have some hobbies.
That's great. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Do you manage to speak to your friends and have hobbies?
No.
That's amazing. Thank you, Mike. So just
I'm a teacher, so you do as I say, not as I do. Of course.
So just a little reminder that if you want to reach out to Mike, here's his email.
Yeah.
So feel free to send whatever question you want and some feedback if you want. And you will all get this certificate to your email address within 3 working days. And about the next webinar, I'll let Mike introduce that.
So I don't know if you know Malcolm Mann. Malcolm is one of our author of Optimize. He's based in Athens. I was lucky enough to be in Athens a few weeks ago and got to spend some time with Malcolm. Malcolm is not only a great author, but he's one of my favorite presenters as well, and I never miss his sessions. And this is a really interesting topic. How do we talk about the future in English? There's no real future tense, so how do we do that? And Malcolm's webinar is going to explain how we speak about it and how to simplify that for your students. So I recommend it's on over 2 days. It's either the 29th or the 30th of October. Please join us for that. It's going to be a great webinar.
That's great. And if you want to learn more about our webinars, if you want to watch the old sessions or register for the new ones, you can just visit the first link that you can see on the screen, macmillanenglish.com/webinars. and you will find all the registration links to the new webinars and the archived webinars. And if you want to learn more about our blog that Mike mentioned, and even the article that Mike mentioned, Guilt-Free Teaching by Katie Harris, visit the second link that you can see on the screen. And if you want to know more about Language Hub, which is our new course, visit the third link that you can see on the screen, which is languagehub.macmillanenglish.com. And again, you will get the certificate within 3 working days directly to your email address.
This is mine. I've got mine now. You have to wait 3 days for yours, I'm afraid, but I'm going to put this next to my desk. Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Mike.
It's my pleasure. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone. We're talking about time management, and we understand how busy you are, and we are always very appreciative of the fact that you would spend an hour of your time with us. It's very humbling for us, and to have over 400 teachers from all around the world. It's a great privilege, and I know many of you join us regularly for our webinars. I'm in charge of the webinar program, so if you have any suggestions, please send me an email. Let me know what you think. It's always great to hear from you. So listen, we've gone over the hour now. This is bad time management on my behalf, so I'll let you go and go to work or go to bed, depending where in the world you're available. If you want to have a look at this again, because I know some of the tips are quite complicated, you can go to our webinar page next week and you'll find the recording on there.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike, again. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.